Welcome guys. In this video I'm going to be showing you how to calculate the correct amount of penetration that you need for your armament. So you've got a variety of penetration values that can penetrate all the different types of enemy ship classes you'll be coming up against. You'll have no doubt noticed that when you are facing the enemy and sometimes you land gigantic penetrating shots which can cripple ships almost immediately, sometimes even one-shot them, and then other times you can shoot 1,000 shots and it doesn't really do much damage. You never get any of these massive critical hits. So I'm going to show you how to calculate as accurately as you can without actually knowing what the enemy's got. So first of all, you're going to need to know approximate ranges that you're going to be fighting at. So I'm going to be doing all of these calculations based on a battleship versus battleship duel, and then you can calculate, if you want, heavy cruiser, light cruiser and the rest of the ships. But I'll be showing you how to build out battleships in this video. So the first thing you might want to know is the ranges that you're going to be fighting at, the maximum range in particular. So one way you can do this is just set up a battleship duel for each of the years or each of the decades, then just sail towards the enemy and see where you spot them in a duel. That'll be where you know that your maximum range is approximately. So I've already done this, and in 1890 your maximum effective range is about 5 kilometers. Then in 1900 it's approximately 10 kilometers. In 1910 it's approximately 15 kilometers. In 1920 it's approximately 20 kilometers. 1930 it's approximately 25 kilometers. So each decade it's gone up by 5 kilometers. So it's quite an easy way to remember. So 5 kilometers, 10, 15, 20, 25. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is build your ship out. So we're going to start in 1890. So you build your ship out, then you try and match your armament to your main guns first. You try and match your main guns to what your armor is. So you assume that the enemy is going to have a similar loadout to you. So once you've built your ship, you then check to see what your main belt is. Add in your armor quality, so that's 13.5. You know that your range, your maximum range is about 5 kilometers at this decade. So you want 13.5 at 5 kilometers. So we've got 18.5 here at 5 kilometers. So we've easily got enough penetration. So what you could do in later eras is reduce this to reduce the penetration value down to 13.5. You can reduce this to reduce the penetration value closer to 13.5, and obviously you can change these to get the penetration value close to 13.5. So it looks like the best option for this would be to use light shells, because we can't change this and we can't change these. So the other thing is changing your barrel length will change your armor piercing. So at the moment we're on 16.4, we want it approximately 13.5. And the other thing obviously is changing your diameter. So let's reduce the diameter down to 0. We're on 15.3. So we can just reduce this slightly. So you can either leave it, there you go, 13.7. So that is the perfect armor penetration to destroy an equal ship. So you can either leave it at max length because it's got the best accuracy, and then just fight it a little bit further away, or you can reduce it down to be exactly the correct amount versus an equal ship to you. Obviously you never know if the enemy's got an equal ship to you, so you might want to overcompensate and just have slightly more. So 15.3 is a perfect amount really to overcompensate just slightly. Okay, so the next thing you're going to want to do is with your other guns. You want your other guns to match up with the AP value to fill in the gaps. So if you're taking a 9-inch gun, then at 5 kilometers your penetration is 15.3. So you want a gun which is going to fill in the gaps to destroy the smaller classes of ship. So here you see we've got 8.8 with this gun and 15.3 with that gun. And then with the 2-inch gun you've got 4.4. So we've got 15.3, 8.8, 4.4. So that's a nice broad range that can destroy most different classes. If you don't fill in the gaps, then like say if we didn't have a 5.9-inch gun, we just went for all 2 inches, then there'd be a massive gap between 15.3 and 4.4. So anything in between you're either going to partial pen or over pen. So it's always good to try and match your calibers to fill in the gaps as best as possible. The other thing obviously is the HE rounds. So your HE rounds can fill in some of the gaps as well. So we've got 4.7 here. Sorry, not 4.7, 3.8 here. So it's 15.3 on the AP, 3.8 on the HE. So you can then look to see what your next caliber is. So it'll go 15.3, 8.8, then this is 4.4, but you've also got 3.8 on the HE rounds, 2.2 on the HE rounds, and 1.1 on the HE rounds. So all of them values are different, so they're all going to fill in a different category. So if one of them's over penning, you can switch to HE and it'll do a different amount to what your other guns are doing. So if you find that, say like your HE on this is the same as your AP on your next gun, you can then change your HE values here on the shells. You don't really want them to be the same. You don't want a HE of one gun to be the same as the AP of another, because you want them to fill in the gaps. So now the HE here would be 1.7 and the AP, yeah, so basically we've reduced it too much now in my opinion. So keeping it at base fuse is a much better option. So that is how I design my battleships. First of all, you get your main guns to match up with what your main belt would be, and then you add in secondary guns which fill in the gaps to destroy all of the smaller ships. Okay, so we can go up to 1900 now. So you design your ship out. I haven't actually designed this ship fully, but you design your ship out, you put your armor on, so you make sure you've armored it up properly, and then you know that your main belt is 12 plus 75%, which is 21. Your optimal maximum engagement range is 10 kilometers, because it's a decade above 1890, so it's plus 5 kilometers. So 5 plus 5 is 10 kilometers. So at 10 kilometers we want to do 21 inches of main belt. So 10 kilometers, 21.5 inches of main belt. So I've obviously already designed this, so I will have changed these to see which one's got 21.5 inches for 10 kilometers. So that's obviously too much. That's nowhere near enough. And that's spot on. And then obviously you change these. So you just create a combination of these four, which will get you into the range that you want your armor penetration to be at. You then equip secondary guns which fill in the gaps. So we've got at 10 kilometers 21.5 and 5.4 for the HE. Then we've got 8.4 and 2.1. So that's 21.5, 8.4, 5.4 and 2.1. So they combined have filled four completely different categories of enemy armor. And then obviously you've got your 2-inch gun, which will fill in the rest. So you've got 4.1 and 1 inch at 5 kilometers there. So 4.1 and 1 inch at 5 kilometers, and this has got 3.5 at 5 kilometers. So as you can see, at every single range we've got a different penetration value for all of our guns. If you find that it's the same with some guns, then you can just switch out this 7.9 for an 8.9 or a 5.9. But you basically want all of your guns to do a different penetration value. So you've always got a chance to land one of them massive penetrating shots. But you always start with setting up your main gun to penetrate equal value to what your main belt is. Okay, so let's move on to 1910. So you build your ship out. Like I say, I haven't fully built it out. I haven't done the speed and whatnot, but I've set up what the armor value would be approximately. This is probably a little bit too high. Okay, so you put your armor on, you set your armor values, you look at your armor quality, you times that, or you percentage it, however you want to word it, with your main belt. So 110% 13, which is 26 plus 10%, so 27.3. So we want to do approximately 27.3. We're in 1910, so the maximum range is going to be 15 kilometers. So it's plus 5 per decade. So that is 27.3 at 15 kilometers. So we have a look at our gun, 15 kilometers, 28.3. So just a tiny bit more than what we actually need, which is pretty much perfect. Okay, so obviously the way that I got to that is by changing these, getting the right combination of your propellants, your bursting charges, your AP shells. I always go for heavy shell unless I can't get these combinations to fit in the right category, and then I'll adjust this down. Okay, so that's why I've got Dunite here and not one of the other two, to get the correct armor penetration values. Then once again you fill in the gaps. So at 15 kilometers you've got 28.3, 7.1, and then we've got 11.4 and 2.8. So that's four completely different values. And and then obviously you can put your 2 inches on if you want. At some point the enemy get torpedoes which range outside your, or longer than your 2-inch guns. So what you're going to want to do, so here we've got 4.1, so we're still okay here, but when they go above 5 kilometers, you're going to want to ditch the 2.9ers and start using up to 5.9 instead, whatever will fit on your ship. Basically, you just put the longest barrel on. So this is just using casemates on the towers at the moment, so we'd still be using 2 inches on this. Okay. So we can now check out 1920. So we know that our engagement range is about 20 kilometers because we're in 1920. So it's 1890 is 5, plus 5 for 1900, which is 10, plus 5 for 1910, which is 15, plus 5 for 1920, which is 20 kilometers. So 1920, 20 kilometers. Okay, so you design your ship. Once it's fully designed, you have a look to see what your armor belt is. You multiply your armor quality to your armor belt. So we've got 28 plus 2.8, so that's 30.2. So at 20 kilometers we need to do 30.2. So we've got 30.7 there with this gun. So obviously I will have changed these, so I've gone to capped ballistic 2 now, because we're keeping with the 12-inch gun because it's got the best accuracy. So you just change these 3 to try and get the correct amount of AP on your main gun, and obviously change this if you can't get the correct amount. Then you do the same thing, you fill in the gaps with your secondary guns. So at 20 kilometers, 30.7, 7.9. Obviously we can't see what our AP is here, so we can have a look at the 17.5 instead. So 3.3, 12.7, 9.5. So 3.3, 9.5 and 12.7. So you can see there 3 different penetrating values. So what I usually do, it kind of works out that if you've got the highest here, you use the highest here. If you've got standard, you use standard. Unfortunately, standard on the HE is not in the same slot that standard is on the AP. So this one's 3rd in, this one's 4th in. So you just need to remember that it's a different slot. But yeah, you usually find that you use the same shell type of HE and AP to match up the armor values, penetration values. Okay, so we can have a look to see yeah, that's what I needed to show you. Okay, so when you get to 1920, wrong button. When you get to 1920, you'll find that the enemy have got quite high main belt, and obviously if they angle correctly, you might not get any penetrating shots. You're now using capped ballistic, so you're going to get more ricochets, but they won't have quite as high deck armor, so you'll have a much better chance trying to pen the deck than you will penning the belt. Well, if you're using 20% long barrels, you virtually never get deck hits and deck pens. So if we have a look at our gun here at 20 kilometers, our deck pen is only 5.4. So we've got a maximum 5.4 deck pen, which is never going to reach what the enemy's main deck is. So we've got a main deck of 8 plus 120, which is 16, 17, 18 practically. So we've got an 18 main deck, and then obviously you calculate your aft and fore deck as well. So what you can do is set up 2 different calibers of gun on your ship. I recommend, if you're going to do this, to put them at the same end of the ship, so 2 of the same caliber at the front and 2 of the same caliber at the back, just so, say if you're facing bow in, both guns can shoot. If you're facing stern in, both guns can shoot. That way you don't get the target lock bug. Okay, so you check, you've worked out what your main deck is, which was about 18 inches, and then you know your engagement range is 20 kilometers, so you can now put on a gun of larger caliber and get a deck penetration above 18 inches. So you can see here at our maximum range we've got a 28.4 inch deck pen. So this is now good enough to land deck penetration shots. So the reason I've left it 28.4 and not reduced it down to 18 is because as you get closer to the target, your deck pen reduces instead of increases like the belt penetration values do. So you want your maximum range to be high on the penetration, and you want your minimum range to be closer to the correct amount. So 18 inches is what we're aiming to get. So we've got 17.2 inches of deck pen at 12.5 kilometers, which is almost the right amount to penetrate their main deck. So we know to penetrate the main deck we fight between 20 kilometers and 12.5 kilometers. So this way, if you're struggling to get belt pens, we've got a gun which will get deck pens instead. So this is the perfect mix of guns to be able to penetrate both belt and deck at any range between 20 kilometers and 12.5 kilometers, which is the range that you're going to want to be fighting at in 1920. So you can adjust these numbers ever so slightly if you want slightly less deck pen. So if we put that up to 15, at 20 kilometers that's reduced it to 17.9, which is the perfect amount to penetrate the main deck at max range. But then obviously once you get close to the max range you won't be able to pen the main deck anymore. So I recommend doing it this way round. Okay, so on to 1930 now. So we know our engagement range is going to be approximately 25 kilometers because we know what decade we're in. So we stick with the same mixed caliber guns from the previous decade, and we match up the barrel lengths to get the AP values to be different on each gun. So 25 kilometers here is 7.2 and 28.1. Here we've got 9.2 and 35.9. So you set the barrel lengths so the penetration values are different on your 2 main caliber guns. So that means if one can't pen, the other one probably can. And then obviously you see what your main deck armor is and then calculate what you need in terms of main deck penetration values. So here we've got 8.6, 122, so that's approximately 8.5, 17, 8.6, which is 217, so it's about 19. So we've got 19-inch main deck, so we want about 19-inch penetration value at the closest range that we're going to get to, which is 12.5 kilometers. So we've got the perfect amount to get a deck pen at 12.5 kilometers, and then at our peak range we can switch to HE if we want, or we can obviously continue using AP to get belt pen shots and deck over pen shots. Okay, so now you've covered all of your bases with your main guns, you now cover your bases with your secondary guns. So as you can see here, I've got two different calibers on my secondary guns. So I've got 6.9 and 8.9 now. So basically here, the 8.9s don't fit, which is why I've got 6.9. But we want a gun which is going to cover the slots of the areas that the other guns can't pen. So at 20 kilometers, or let's see what the range is of this, 20 kilometers, yeah. So at 20 kilometers here, we've got a 9.9 and a 38.6. So we want a gun that's going to do less than 9.9. So we've got one here that's 7.5. This one is 6.8. So we've got, that's at 17.5 kilometers. So we've got guns that cover a variety of different armor values all over the ship. So it can get a penetrating shot on a variety, all the way up from the maximum ship that you're going to be fighting, which is equal to yours, battleship, all the way down to a destroyer basically, or a light cruiser. So at this point you're not really going to need your 2-inch guns anymore. So what we could do is reduce this a little bit further and have this at 5.9 inch, because then this now becomes our destroyer killing gun, and 6.9 might be slightly too high for destroyers, but I think it's probably the HE values on this is probably just about right for destroying destroyers. So this is why we use different caliber guns all over the ship. So it's a bit of a strange choice. I know the majority of people will stick to 1 caliber main gun and 1 caliber secondary guns, but if you take in a mix, always take at least 2 of the same turret, never just take 1. So if you've only got 2 main guns, you don't take 2 different calibers. You need 2 of the same caliber gun to get a target lock. If you only take 1 of each, you're permanently in the unlocked target state. Okay. I don't know if I've done a 1941. I can't. No, I haven't done a 1941. So what you will find in 1940 is the penetration values of the guns are so high that trying to armor up a ship to not get penetration shots is impossible versus other battleships. So what I then do is, instead of keep increasing the main belts to try and stop this, so like instead of putting it up to 20, I just do an all-round armor scheme. So I'll do like 12 and 10 all over. So now, instead of trying to protect against guns of equal value on an equal value ship, you're now just trying to protect all over the ship against a smaller class of ship. So an armoured cruiser or a light cruiser. So they basically become invulnerable to anything other than a battleship. Then what I recommend is trying to set up this type of ship as a long-range encounter ship only. So it doesn't really need smaller caliber guns. You can take one smaller caliber gun if you want. So say for example, just take the largest secondary gun that you can. So you just do something like that. Then maybe put another gun on here, whichever one will fit. But your primary role for this ship is to put as many big guns on as you can to smash the enemy battleship from as long a distance as possible. So the best way to do this is with deck penetration shots from massive range rather than belt pen. So what I'd do is I'd take the biggest caliber gun, main gun that you can take, which still has a decent mark. So this is Mark 317. Looks like all of them are Mark 3. But so I never go above 17, but Mark 317 is actually a really good gun for getting deck shots. But unfortunately there's a bug in the game. Of course there is. Why wouldn't there be? There's a bug in the game where all super battleships and modern battleships of all nations can basically never get hit in the deck. So the one place you want to hit them, there's a bug that stops you from being able to hit them in the place that you want to hit them. Oh, fantastic. So yeah, unfortunately, because that is not an option against these three types of ships, once you get into 1940, you're just going to need to go for main belt. So you'd want plus 20 length and just go for main belt hits. So you're going to be engaging at approximately 25 to 30 kilometer range. So you just put the biggest length gun on that you can on a reasonably sensible main gun. So 16, 15, 16, 17, whichever one's got the highest mark, that is what I recommend. So you'd probably go for 15-inch. Longest barrel. And then we've got here at 30 kilometers we can pen 28 inches of armor. So that's plenty enough, 28 inches of armor. But before 1940, the enemy, it looks like they have got access to modern battleships in 1930, so you can't get deck pens in 1930 either. You can get them against all other classes of ship though, so you can get deck pens against the N3, G3, modernised Dreadnought, and any other type of ship that's available. So for example, experimental battleship, all the modernised Dreadnoughts, pretty much you can get penetrating deck, or even just deck hits in general, not just penetration, but you can get deck hits against every type of ship in the game apart from super battleships and modern battleships, which hopefully they're going to fix at some point, but you never know. You never know. So yeah, once you get to 1930, the deck pens against enemy battleships become a little less prevalent or important because you can't actually hit them in the deck, but you can still do severe damage against the other types of battleships that are available. The N3, G3, modernised Dreadnought, experimental battleship. So you don't technically have to go for a deck shooting gun. but it's nice to have that option just in case. Okay, well, I think that covers everything all throughout the decades of how to set up and how to calculate your guns to be able to penetrate everything that you're going to face at all different ranges that you're going to face them at. So I hope this has been helpful, guys. Take care, and I'll see you soon.